Imagine if you were 18 years old and you are suddenly kidnapped and held captive in a basement. No one can hear your screams and there is no way of escaping. If you do not listen and do as your kidnapper says, you are beaten and abused every day. Now imagine if the kidnapper was your own father. How would you feel? What would you do? That's exactly what happens in the 2021 movie called Girl in the Basement. But before we begin, beware of spoilers, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a young girl called Marie being frantically rushed to the hospital by her father and sister. Her sister called Sara tells their father Don that Marie has stopped breathing and he needs to put his foot down and reach the hospital fast. Upon reaching the hospital, Don picks up Marie and carries her inside and tells Sara not to say a word inside. The paramedics administer CPR and give Marie oxygen to get her breathing again. As Sara watches on from behind the emergency room door, she can see that her sister's heart has stopped beating while the doctors battle to save her life. The movie then shoots back to 20 years earlier where we see Sara and her family sitting around a table eating dinner. The family seem like a regular family, but when Sara asks whether she can go out that night, her father Don pulls her down onto her chair and tells her she is not allowed to go. That night, Sara decides to get ready and sneaks out with her boyfriend called Chris. Unknown to her, her father and mother check in on her and discover her bedroom window open and her gone. At the party, Sara and her boyfriend dance the night away and have so much fun. They are clearly in love and enjoy spending the night together. When Sara arrives back home early in the morning, Don sees her with Chris, and he confronts her on the porch. Don is clearly angry and has been waiting for her all night. They both get into an argument and Sara eventually tells Don that when she turns 18, she will leave home and do what she likes. She is then seen rushing upstairs into her bedroom. When Sara's mother comes into her room to tell her she is grounded, Sara tells her that Don is overreacting and when she turns 18, she will leave and go traveling with Chris. Her father is standing outside their door listening to her conversation and he is clearly angry by what he is hearing. We then see Don rushing down to the basement. That's when it is revealed that Don has been secretly constructing a hidden room. The movie then shoots to a few months later where Sara finally graduates. She seems carefree with the whole world in front of her. One day when Don and Sara are alone, he asks her to help him carry a large box down into the basement. While they are down there, Don shows Sara the hidden room and tells her it is a secure safe room which was constructed by the previous owner of the house. When Sara goes to look inside, Don quickly shuts the door and looks her inside. Sara tries to scream out for help, but it is no use. The safe room is soundproof and nobody is able to hear her. Don walks off and Sara is trapped and there is no way out. Later that evening, Irene gets worried that Sara has not arrived back home. Don tells her she is probably out with her boyfriend and will be back later. Irene isn't so sure and wants to call the police. 4 days go by and finally Don comes down to the basement to check on Sara. Sara hides behind a pillar and tries to push Don out of the way to escape. Unfortunately, there is a second door and Don pulls her back inside. She tells him that he has gone mad, and she is unable to breathe down here. Don tells her as long as there is power, she will be able to breathe. But if she misbehaves or keys in the wrong code 3 times on the keypad, the ventilation system will shut down. He tells her exactly what he expects from her. We see a police officer visiting the house and speaking with the family. Her mother and sister tell the police officer that they don't believe Sara would ever just get up and leave like this, especially without telling them. The officer tells Irene that as Sara has already turned 18 and they have no leads, all he can do is file a missing persons report. We then see Sara in the basement and she begins losing her mind from being locked up. She starts smashing up the place and begins hallucinating about her boyfriend and their plans after she turned 18. Her boyfriend Chris comes to the house hoping for some news on Sara. Don doesn't like him coming to the house and tells him that he thinks she has run away with the boy called Steve. On the 21st day of Sara being held captive, Don comes down to the basement and brings Sara a cake for her 18th birthday and a red dress which he asks her to model for him. Sara asks Don for a clock as she has no idea of when it is day or night in the basement. Don tells her that if she wants something, she will have to do something for him. One day, she tries to attack Don with a sharp object. Don easily stops her and in a fit of rage, begins beating her and then forces himself on her to teach her a lesson. The movie shoots to a year later where we see Sara cleaning up in the basement. That's when it is revealed that she has become pregnant with her father's child. One day, her waters break, and she gives birth to a girl named Marie all by herself. Her father continues to keep Sara and the child locked up in the basement. We are next taken to 4 years later, when Sara is pregnant again. Sara's family are still unaware of where their daughter is and Don continues to live a double life. Sara gives birth to a boy called Michael again all by herself. With 2 children in the basement, Things become very hard for Sara and she finds it more and more difficult to entertain the children. One day, Don brings down a TV for Sara and the two children as a gift for being good in his eyes. Life is difficult for Sara and she tells her children stories to keep them busy. After all these years, Chris visits the family hoping for some good news. One day Amy finds out from Chris that Don has lied to him and that Sara did not run off with Steve. When Irene finds out about this, she and Amy confront Don and ask him why he lied to Chris. They both get into an argument and Don becomes defensive. When Irene storms off, Don gets up and follows her. Amy notices that Don has left the keys to the basement on the sofa. Amy quickly picks them up and makes her way down to the basement. Just as Amy begins to look around, Don turns up behind her and demands she gives him the keys back. Amy begins to cry in anger and blames him for Sara running away. Another few years go by, and we see Sara giving birth to another baby called Thomas. Sara is seen giving Don a shoulder massage while she tries to convince him to take Thomas upstairs. After all these years of being attacked and abused, she knows that she has to make Don think that he is in control and that she genuinely cares and likes him. She convinces Don, and one day, when Irene comes outside, she finds a baby left on the porch. Irene is unable to understand what is going on, but when she finds a note saying that the baby is Sara's and she wants her to look after him, she is overwhelmed and happy tears run down her face. When Irene picks up the baby and takes him inside, Don finds another note in the basket which Sara wrote in desperation for help. Don gets angry as he realizes that Sara has been playing him and lying to get him to do what she wants. He goes downstairs to the basement and punishes Sara for messing with him. The scene then shoots to 14 years later, where Sara is still held captive in the basement. Sara's daughter Marie has now grown up into a beautiful young girl. One day while in the basement, Don starts to show an interest in Marie. Sara looks at her father and realizes his intentions and warns him to stay away from her. Don takes an instant dislike to the way Sara talks to him and reminds her who is in charge. He leaves the basement in anger, and that night, he switches off the power to the basement, stopping the ventilation and causing everyone to gasp for breath. In the next scene, we see Sara and Marie sitting down and reading a book when they see water dripping down on them. As she looks on, she notices that the water has damaged the ceiling and begins probing. She picks up a spoon and starts carving away the ceiling. She is finally able to create a hole and with a flashlight, starts flickering it, hoping that someone will be able to see. That night, someone outside sees and they go over to the house, and unluckily for Sara, he is met by Don and tells him about what he has seen. Don gets mad and charges down to the basement. Sara is pregnant again, but this doesn't stop Don. The beating is so severe that Sara loses her baby. Don takes and buries the dead baby in the backyard at night so no one sees him. One day when Don comes down to the basement, Marie and Michael ask when they will be allowed out. Don blames Sara and tells them it is their mother's fault as she does not do as she is told. That evening, Marie and Michael become frustrated and pester their mother, and she is unable to tell them the full story of what her father has done to her. A few hours later when Sara gets up, they are seen sitting around the table and they apologize to their mother. Sara decides that her children are old enough to understand and that this is the right time for them to know about what Don has done to her. When she finally tells them that Don is not only their grandfather but also their father, this is too much for her children and they both go into shock. Unable to fully comprehend the hurt and trauma Don has caused, Marie is unable to breathe and begins having an asthma attack. In all the commotion, the children are very confused and start thinking about whether in some way they are responsible for all this. The scene then cuts to a year later where Don is having trouble at work. Things go from bad to worse when he loses his job. It causes a lot of tension at home with his family. Don is finding it increasingly difficult to juggle his double life, and when he receives a foreclosure notice for their house, he decides to take drastic action. One evening he decides to connect a pipe from his car's exhaust to the air vent. While doing so, Thomas unexpectedly turns up in the garage and spoils Don's plan. Without even knowing it, he manages to save Sara's and his siblings' lives. Next, we are taken to the 20th year in which Sara and the kids have been held in captivity. Marie is having severe difficulties breathing. He helps and takes Sara and Marie to the hospital, leaving Michael behind. We are then taken back to the start of the movie where Marie is being rushed to the hospital and Don tells Sara not to say a word. Luckily, Marie arrives at the hospital just in time and to Sara's relief. Afterwards, the hospital requires information on Marie's medical history. Don quickly grabs the medical form and tells the nurse that Marie has only ever been treated with natural remedies at home. While he continues talking to the nurse, Sara is exhausted but looks around the hospital, realizing that this will be her only ever chance to ever escape. Sara purposely knocks over a glass of water all over the medical form to try and distract Don. When Don turns his back for a second, Sara quickly runs over to a nurse who is standing next to a police officer and informs her she is in need of immediate help. As Don looks on, he realizes what has just happened and tries to quickly walk out of the hospital. The police officer quickly runs behind Don and stops him. Next, we see Don being arrested and taken into a police car. Sara is seen talking to Marie in the hospital while she lies in bed and tells her they are finally free. Both Sara and Marie break down crying and can't believe they have finally escaped from Don after 20 years of captivity. Next, we see police officers turn up at Sara's house where they go into the basement and free Michael. Sara's mother and Thomas are totally devastated and in shock and can't believe what they are seeing. A few months later, we see the family sitting around on a beautiful summer day watching Marie, Thomas and Michael playing around. The family are finally free and are seen talking and enjoying the simple things in life. While they sit on the porch, they see someone approaching on a motorbike. To Sara's surprise, it's Chris. They go for a walk around the lake and sit down to talk. Sara begins explaining to him about what happened. Chris can't believe the years of suffering she has been through. He tells her he wishes he tried harder to find her and maybe then, things would have been different. While talking, Chris hands Sara a present. To her surprise, it is a pig helmet, the same helmet he bought for her when she was going to turn 18 and they were supposed to go on a road trip together. The final scene shows Sara holding on to Chris from behind as they ride off on his motorbike and the movie ends there.